Hi, Peter.
Good evening. How are you?
Good, good.
Good.
Trying to get I signed on earlier because I had to get the agenda off the town website. So
You and I both,
yeah,
as well as the link, and get my chance to review a little bit what we're doing tonight. So,
yes.
how, how are things in your family with all of the downsides now of COVID and all? Is that your family in good shape?
Reasonably well. My daughter got it earlier on. She's recovered. My brother got it. He's recovered. So
No long-term implications seem to be haunting them, I guess.
not at this time. No.
Good, good.
How about with you and your family?
Well, we have about the same lineup.
Yeah.
Kids, of all sorts of different ages. But most of the adults have missed it, but kids have actually gotten it. Some quite seriously too. A little concern about long-term effects, so we're not sure we're totally out of the woods and all of that stuff.
No, we may never be.
Yeah,
Totally out of the woods, right?
I think we have to live with it, I'm afraid. I think this is going to be around, and it's just going to be part of life. But
yeah, it seems to be the way everyone's heading.
Yeah, yeah. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, how you doing?
Sarah.
Fine, thanks. How many meetings do you have this week?
Oh, God, this is the third
Yeah,
one.
that's about the answer. Oh, God. I just can't believe the schedule you've got.
Well, it's the 40Bs are just very taxing.
Yeah, well, yes, I can only imagine.
I'm outside my comfort zone. I'm a very private person, and I don't like to be an exhibit for hundreds of people in town.
Well, it's a hard role that you're carrying here, I think, with a very hard topic.
Yeah. Well, luckily I retired in July of 2020, so at least I have time. I couldn't do it if I wasn't retired.
Yeah.
It's way too much time. But we're starting to make headway.
Good, 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 good. But we seem to be making headway on our minutes too, so that's good.
Yeah, but I didn't. Did you get minutes for this? No, because they're stuck in my inbox. I'll get them out so that we can do them next week. Yeah, because Gail's keeping up. I'm just not.
We're doing a lot better this year than we did last year.
I was about to say, I think we're actually doing pretty well.
Right.
Yeah.
And I see by the cricket that town meeting has been delayed.
Yes.
I haven't gotten the cricket yet.
It sounds like roughly the April 25th, and maybe they'll divide the warrant into 2 meetings.
Right. They're thinking of delaying the bulk of the
Planning board?
Yeah, planning board changes, which is good because the finance committee is going to have to weigh in on the cost impact of some of those things. And I wasn't too excited about doing that this spring.
No, I can understand that. Yeah.
But they haven't finalized when they're going to do it, but gives us a little more breathing room.
Yeah. I didn't know if it was going to affect our schedule at all going forward over the next few weeks, or whether your thought is to, soldier forth and just kind of get through everything by, I think, March 1st you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think we'll go out further, and I'm thinking of skipping February 24th, which is school vacation week, which I don't think people will complain about.
No, I don't think they'll complain. I don't think so. Hey, Jason, good evening.
Good evening. Solved the audio problem.
Okay, good.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
Still waiting for more people to join.
Yep.
Sure.
Sarah, on that commercial development on School Street, was that lab in the area that they were considering the assisted living place or in addition to it?
There's apparently an old gravel pit near
Yes,
the MAC, and it's a 40-acre parcel
right.
where they're talking. I don't know how much more land there is up there, but I think there's other parcels.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I thought it was separate, is what my
Yeah.
geography, you know.
I thought there was a total of 140 acres or something, but I could be off.
And I really take it as being, as Sarah says, very dominated by the actual quarry. I mean, the quarry area, I think was, in fact, that's part of why they can't have a local septic or something. Because it's
Yeah.
very,
Oh, right.
very, very poor ground for any kind of leaching.
I remember also when they were blasting, the people on Mill Street, their wells would run dry.
Where they were.
Jeez.
Yeah,
How
That might
long
be
ago was
something to
that,
take-
Dean? How long ago was
thinking that's the 70s and
that? A
80s.
long time ago, yeah.
When they
Yeah,
were
quite a
building the
while.
MAC? Or was
It
that when
was
they,
before the Mac. Yeah, no,
Oh,
this was
okay.
just when they were using
Doing
it
the
as a
gravel pit.
gravel. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
harvesting the gravel.
Wait till they blast Shingle Hill.
Right.
Still waiting for some people to join, apparently. Light. I know Mark is joining. He was just getting off a CPC meeting. Greg's on. Gail's on. Dean's on. Peter's on. Tenant
Andrea?
Crosby's on. Is Andrea on? No. I'm counting on this being a half-an-hour meeting.
Mm.
We all have dreams.
You want to start the clock now or?
We need a few more members to join.
That was at the quorum.
Anything less than 3 is good.
My problem is after the 40B meetings, I'm so tense, I stay awake forever. So I went to bed at 1:30 this morning.
Ooh.
And I have a cat alarm that comes
Oh,
on.
yeah, they're good for that. Mhm. Understand.
Andrea's on. Andrea's connecting. Hi, Andrea.
Hello.
How old are your kids now?
19, 9, and 3.
Okay, wow. Thought the baby wasn't a baby anymore.
Nope, not at all.
Greg, what was for dinner?
It was very quick. We just got up to Vermont.
Oh, okay.
I'm visiting my daughter for a few days.
Okay, well, good to hear
So I
that.
had just enough time to grab a little soup and a little cheese melt.
Oh,
You stopped
goodness.
at the wagon wheel.
Well, we have a
Nothing-
vested interest, Greg, in keeping you in good health, so that, you know, be sure to get some dinner.
Yes, yes.
We're
Yeah,
in
came through-
Vermont.
We're staying in with some friends in Waterbury Center, which is just south of Stowe.
Okay, yep.
That were, oh, the ice cream, Ben and Jerry, is that where
Yes,
they're looking?
yes.
Yeah, that's where they're looking? Yeah.
Yeah, that's where their main factory is, right here in Waterbury, yeah. Yep.
I'm still waiting for another member to join so we have a quorum.
Are we missing Mike Pratt, Maury and Mark?
And Andy. Andy
Andy,
said,
yeah.
Andy had a conflict. He wasn't quite sure when his conflict was, which kind of led me to believe it was not controlled by his calendar, but maybe a family calendar. But I know Mark was on a CPC meeting. I received an email from him recently. He was just getting off the CPC meeting at 6:52, so maybe he's not quite off yet. Maury tends to be a little late. Because we have a 7-member board, right? So we need 4.
Mhm.
I'll see if I can ping Mark. Gotta find his email. Oh, boy.
This just became the 10-minute meeting, Sarah.
I know Maury's planning to come. Let me see if I can find him. Done my pinging, nobody's responding. Responding.
You try.
And it may be that Mark's still in CPC. He sent me an email at 6:52. He said he was running 10 minutes late. So he should be here. Maury's logging in now.
There we go. That'll get us going.
Sorry about this, everyone. Should be an easy night, chief, if nobody's here.
Well, if you let me make up the quorum and I just vote to approve everything and we move on, then you'll have your short meeting.
Maury's just joined. Okay,
Sorry I'm late, Sarah. It's
that's
always
all right.
traffic.
Mark's running late too, and I haven't heard from Mike Pratt, so we were, and Andy has a conflict. So at 7:12 PM on Thursday, February 10th, I will call the Finance Committee meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded. And first on the agenda is reviewing the fiscal year 23 operating and capital budgets of the fire chief. I believe the fire chief has a presentation for us.
Well,
So
I have slides that will answer any questions or explain some of the topics in detail, so I don't have it in a specific order. So
Okay,
however you want to approach it, knowing what your issues are, and then I have a collection of slides that I can go into to explain any questions you may have.
okay. So I think that one of the issues is that we want to talk about the status of the call firefighters and if you're looking for staffing changes. Do people have any questions on the operating budget as submitted, which did not include any staffing changes?
I have just a general question for the chief. So a
Okay.
lot of the small adjustments in the other expense areas, I assume they have mostly to do with the facilities department taking over facilities responsibilities for the firehouse. Is that,
No, actually, that doesn't play into it at all.
oh, I see. Okay, well, I see. Okay. Like custodial services and all this, it gets changed. So what are electricity, let me see. Electricity goes down by 11%. I wish that was true at my house. It's not at my house, so I don't know how it is at the fire department. Building repairs goes totally out of the budget, so that's not custodial kind of things or facilities folks?
That hasn't been in there since 2020.
Oh,
So building repairs is in there. But the maintenance, we didn't have any custodial. We did it on our own, so.
okay.
But a
So with
lot of
building
the,
repairs, there was $8,500 in this year's
Yeah,
budget.
I don't know why that went to zero, honestly. Because we do experience lots of repairs, so I'm not sure what happened there, whether it was a keystroke mistake on my part or,
No, I have building repairs still in at 8,500, just a 0% increase.
No, it actually is showing a 0, unless it's a printing error here. I think we meant to level fund that.
Yeah, I believe you're correct. Yeah, I didn't cut that out.
Oh, there's 2 lines, Greg. One has
Yes,
8,500 and one has 0.
Right, I'm seeing that.
Yeah,
So it should be the 8,500.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct. Thank you for pointing that out.
And how are you so fortunate to have electricity go down by roughly 12%?
That's just an estimation based on the previous expense that it was the previous couple of years.
Okay, great.
telephone's jumping.
Telephone's jumping, that's because we're getting ready to bring the 7 new iPads online for the fire apparatus. So that would be through Verizon. So that would be for data and cell service for the 7 iPads. So
Okay.
that's what the increase is for the telephone.
And the fire gear replacement is going to 0 from 34,000.
That was previously a warrant article. So
Oh.
that money at
Right,
Andrea's insistence has been added back into the budget under the equipment line so that it
Got
doesn't have to be in the warrant article every year.
Understand. Okay, well, that's helpful. I just thought there might be a
Sure.
bigger things happening here.
Have we had any issues with the, over the past year with, staffing with the COVID and everything, or have you pretty much been able to man the shift?
We've been able to manage. There's been a lot of people that have had to quarantine, myself included. But we've been able to maintain the staffing.
And that's like.
Mostly nobody here has had it and it's been exposure due to family members or people at meetings or things like that. So,
Mhm, mhm.
and with the shortened quarantine window to 5 for medical personnel, that's helped out as well.
So the staffing seems adequate then.
Well, we're able to keep the 3 if that's what
Right.
you're referring to.
Not
Yeah,
the four, right, I get it.
Yeah.
The 4.
yeah,
minimum
no,
of
we've,
state
yeah, no,
recommended.
we've kept the 3 right along.
So Chief, could you maybe just tell us about the staffing and how you do that? So you're maintaining 3, but
Yes.
obviously you've got some on vacation and
Mhm.
part-timers. And so could you kind of just tell us what the whole staff is and then how you manage the 3 or how you get to that?
Sure, we have 4 shifts of 3 and 1 floater. So if everybody's here, we have 3. If one person is out and we know in advance, then the floater takes their spot. So the floater is making straight time to fill that slot. But they can't work 7 days a week, so that's usually planned out. So if there's a last minute, somebody calls in sick, then we page out for overtime. We keep an overtime list. It's offered to the full timers. And then usually there's been really only 1 or 2 call firefighters that have been offered it or been able to take it over the course of the year. And if none of the full timers take it, in order to maintain the 3, the firefighter on duty, the previous shift who has the least amount of overtime is forced to stay. So we never drop below the 3.
Got it. So are you essentially probably with yourself, are you basically maintaining a group of sort of 12 plus 1 floater makes 13 and yourself makes 14?
Yes.
Okay.
And how does the floater if everyone's well and attending, what is the floater up to? Just simply
Well,
joins one of the teams?
well, the floater is plugged in as soon as people take vacation.
Oh,
So, and there's usually people taking holidays and things like that. So the floater being the junior most person, if people put in January for the 4th of July, then likely the floater is going to be assigned immediately to the 4th of July. And if people take off Thanksgiving, the floater will be assigned to Thanksgiving. So they're assigned as it becomes available. And then if more short-term openings happen, it can be offered to the floater as well. They have to do a minimum of 90 shifts a year to make the hourly requirement for full-time personnel, but even if they work all 90 shifts or more, there's still 40 shifts that in theory go uncovered, that they're not able to cover, that's then covered with overtime. Just based on the amount of leave people are granted based on their seniority.
And again, if everyone's in attendance and vacations and no health issues, the floater isn't working. Floater is,
No, they're not working at that, but usually there's enough that comes up that
I
they're
see.
in the regular overtime rotation.
got it.
What is the rough actual overtime accumulated so far this year? Greg, this is something I've been sort of wondering in the budget books, is we tend to kind of roll up the entire salaries, but it would be helpful on some of these to show the OT.
So I can let you know right now.
So we've had an office, we've had a firefighter out for a considerable amount of time because of
Yes.
an injury.
So we're currently now, we're negative $7,800. That looks like going December into January. And I have a slide on overtime if you'd like to see it. I don't know if we can screen share.
What is the budget
Yes.
for, what's the
I
budget
believe
for
I've
overtime?
screen shared.
What's the budget for overtime?
I'll show you here. Let me see if, all
Let me know if you can, it works.
right, I will try and do that. Hold on just a second. I gotta pull up the right.
Security, I think I did the security right. Never sure whether it's supposed to have a check or not a check. There's a check.
Can you folks see that?
Yeah, can you make
Yeah.
it any bigger? Good.
Wow.
So barring any unforeseen long-term injuries like we've had in the past couple of years, usually going into January, we've historically been at $10,000 or less remaining in the overtime budget.
Wow,
And so what happens the rest of the year?
Overtime gets filled, and then at the end of the year in May, I have to ask for a transfer.
Yep.
Because it's not been fully funded to the degree that we've spent it.
and is that delta between 20 and 21 driven mostly by the injured firefighter that Greg was mentioning?
Well, I actually did a calculation based on the injured firefighter, and even if you take the injured firefighter out of it, the numbers are almost exactly the same. We're still at $10,000 going into January.
How can that be, Chief?
I went through it with Patrice, and we looked at the numbers in the other years, and we still came out with the bottom line numbers. A lot of people haven't taken vacation or didn't take as many sick time as they had in previous years. I can go back and look at it, but we looked at it twice. Because a couple times last year specifically, I was able to offset the money by putting the floater in because we knew it was going to be a long-term illness. And this time, by the time we knew how long it was going to be, overtime had just run its course as it normally had by the time I was able to assign the floater to cover the vacancy.
So do we know how many, I mean, in multiple years here, we have had someone injured out, right?
Not entirely to the best of my knowledge. I know in the past year and a half that I've been here, there's been a couple of significant periods of time.
Right.
Chief, how much did we budget for overtime in the current year?
We had, I believe it was 120,000 for 2022. Yes, 120 for 2022. And we're at negative 7,800 already.
For the full year.
For the fiscal year, yes.
Yeah, so it's not, that's not month to date, that's not year to date budget over actual, that's total year's budget over actual.
Well, that's the actual as of the end of December was negative $7,800.
Yeah, wow. Gonna be well over 100,000.
Yes, we average anywhere between $19,000 and $30,000 a month on some high months, only because there are several months in the summer for vacations and the same around the Christmas holidays. Those are the most prolific months.
And in 23, what does TA stand for? Next
That
to-
was town administrator, the budget that he
Got it.
submitted to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow, this is really different. Wow.
Well, I know a lot of firefighters like a certain amount of overtime. Are they comfortable? Is your department comfortable with this amount of overtime in lieu of like a second floater?
They would accept a second floater on a short-term basis because like anything else, there are some people that don't want any overtime because they either don't need it or have other employment. There are some that really enjoy the overtime and take it all the time. And then there's the time where if nobody takes it, somebody gets stuck. So, you know, that it varies by person,
Right.
honestly. But it is tough sometimes. There are times where we're not able to get anybody that willingly wants to take the overtime.
And why don't we have a second floater? I mean, it seems that we're spending well over what,
That was one of the several proposals for last time,
I see. Okay,
but that was chosen not to add any new personnel.
got it.
Can I just ask a question here? So if I get these numbers right, we're budgeting 120,000 a year for overtime. But at 19 to 30K a month, it sounds like annual overtime's like 240 to about 360,000 a year, which means our overtime budget on this department's running 120 to 240,000 over budget.
Well,
Are those numbers correct?
no, we're not doing 360,000 a year in overtime.
No, we're definitely not doing that.
Your highest in the last 5 years was that 260,
Yes,
which was last year. And
Yes.
and the others were, I mean, you can see the numbers.
So we're basically running about, so if you average the last several years, we're probably running about 80,000 over the OT budget.
probably. And that's why I recommended adding 80,000 into this year's overtime to bring the 120 up to 200,000. Because that was a more accurate number, I thought, as far as if we're trying to be zero at the end of the year. Now, it does depend with injuries. That does bump it up when we have to cover. The other issue is if we have a lot of calls and guys come back for callback, that's overtime. So some of the full timers do come back for callback. It's not an excessive amount. And if we have any large scale events, that also brings in. Overtime also covers storm coverage. If I put on extra staff, like I did during the most recent blizzard or hurricane or projected flooding, we add additional staff to the ship. That all comes out of overtime too.
Did we add the floater to cut down on the overtime budget or to give people, 3 people on each shift?
My understanding, it was to offset the overtime. That was in place before I got here.
But it hasn't impacted the overtime.
It has some, because the overtime would be even worse if we did not have the floater, because every overtime shift or vacancy he covers is at his straight time. If he wasn't there and we didn't have the floater and we only had 12, then every vacancy to keep us at 3 would be covered at the time and a half rate based on the individual firefighter and their salaries.
So is our issue that we have too many people who've been here too long with too much vacation? Is that
No,
what's
I don't believe
creating the
that's the issue.
overtime?
Well,
What's creating?
the contract gives these guys a tremendous amount of overtime. That was done
Okay.
years ago. And we have tried to pull it back. It's been painful. But it's a lot of, I mean, it's equivalent to, I think it's 7 weeks of vacation.
So they have overtime by right?
Well, it's based on seniority too, as to what level they're at. The newest people don't get as many sick time as vacation time as some of the people that, you have people that have been here over 20 years. So it differs. Plus, the person that's been here 20 years has a higher salary, so their hourly overtime, if they take it, is much more than if the newest firefighter took the overtime.
And
That's
so
just how it works.
what's the status of the call firefighters? Are we using them at all or not?
Well, let me get to that call firefighter.
Okay.
Let me just slideshow from current slide.
Yeah, we can see it. Whoops. Just went smaller.
Yeah, let me go back. Sorry. So we currently have call firefighters. Only one lives in town. Two of the five, excuse me. One has completed paramedic school and is interviewing with other full-time fire departments, and the other is near completion of paramedic school, and he will likely be going on to full-time fire service. Which leaves us 3 call firefighters, only one of which is an EMT. Most of them are not available due to their work situation for daytime callbacks, which we tend to be the busiest. And if you look at the amount of money budgeted for the call department, and then if you look at down the bottom, the figures, a box alarm is usually a fire call or a medical aid call. When we tone it out as a box alarm, any full-timers and any call firefighters are authorized to come back and cover the fire station for additional calls. So if you look at the most recent, we had 669 box alarms in 2021. And with a high estimate, we had call firefighters returning for 6% of those calls. And I say that 6% is high because also in there is the monthly training that they show up for, which is a 2-hour block. So that percentage is actually higher than it should be. We have one call firefighter who's one of the call firefighters that will be leaving to go full-time elsewhere. And if you took him out of the mix, because of his availability and desire to serve, that 6% would probably be closer to 2%. He does at least 6 or 7 times, answers more calls than the next closest person.
And a box alarm is literally when I see, you pull the handle on one of the.
Well, it's an old terminology. We tone it out as a box alarm, but it could be for a fire alarm activation, a motor vehicle accident.
Got it.
A medical aid call.
Okay.
So it comes from the old box alarms of pulling it, but the terminology is stuck, but
Boy,
that's
it
just
sure
how
does
we
grow.
identify it.
I was gonna
It's just-
say, 124, 4 years ago.
Yeah,
How'd that happen?
exactly.
Well, now let me qualify that. Because at that time, medical aid calls were still alarms, not box alarms. So that's not a true reflection.
But
'Cause
19.
right now, a still alarm we have is for a minor call where we don't need additional personnel and they're not authorized to come back. So if somebody had a beeping smoke detector in the battery, that's a still alarm. We just send the on-duty crew, nobody is called back to cover the station because they're still available.
Okay.
So that number is kind of outside the box. That's not a good moniker.
But it's gone up by about 50% over 2 years.
Yep.
People are having a tough time with the smoke alarms. Whoa,
Battery.
I'll have to admit, I've called them twice in the last 3 years.
Keep calling, we'll keep coming.
okay.
Chief, I'm wondering, are you having, obviously there's training, and it sounds like some of these call folks are going through training and then going on to other departments. Could you just tell us about that? And then also your current staff, has there been much turnover? You know, like in the last, like what's the average tenure of a fireman or fireperson in Manchester? Is it 5 years or is it 2 years? What?
It depends, because we have some that are 20+ years. There have been several prior to my arrival here, even after my arrival, that have come here and done 2 or 3 years and moved on to bigger departments. Most of that being people that came here and worked 2 or 3 years or up to 5 years and then went on to Gloucester.
And that's a pay differential that's drawing them?
Well, yes, because Gloucester works 56-hour work week. So where our starting pay is probably around 65,000, their starting pay is probably around 90
Oh, wow. Wow.
on average base pay because of the additional hours built in.
And
For
what's
our
our work,
firefighters.
what's our work week?
It's 24 on, 24 off, 24 on, 96 off. So it averages out to a 42-hour work week in the rotation,
Thank you. That's
where
what I
Gloucester
needed.
is 56.
Yeah,
So
That
if we had a much longer work week and paid up the extra, whatever that was, $25,000, would we save on the other end on?
That would be, need to be negotiated in the contract, because right now it's listed as the 24-hour shift in the current schedule.
Right.
And based on the meeting I've had with the personnel, there is not a flavor to move to 56-hour work week here, even if the additional money were supplied.
even though we lose people to Gloucester over that.
Yep.
For that reason.
Yeah, but the
the
people
self-
who are here are happy with this schedule
Got
and
it.
are willing to work the overtime to make up the difference, and do not have interest in, because of their life situations, the 56-hour work week does not work as well for them. And where that would need to be negotiated in the contract, they really don't have interest in negotiating it at this point.
A lot of them have private businesses, right?
Well, private businesses, 2 parents working, so one's home with the kids, drop off, pick up. During COVID, it was homeschool issues.
Mhm.
Some do the babysitting. So there's, some do coaching, so it's a little bit of everything.
Okay.
But their current exterior lives are now based around this schedule, where a 56-hour would not be amenable to them. But that has been explored. I know in the past it was explored, and my understanding is that they were willing for the 56 hours because it was in essence a third more pay. And their contention was then they should get a third more sick leave and a third more vacation time. And that was not put on the table. And Greg, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because that was before my time. I don't know if you were involved or if that was before your time as well.
No, I was involved with some of those discussions. I would say the union was pretty evenly split on whether they wanted to do it anyways.
Yeah, they're definitely not split now. So it's definitely the current schedule has won out over a potential for 56 hours. So based on this call firefighter information, I'll show you one more call firefighter slide just to put it in perspective. So the cost to bring on a new call firefighter is about $5,000 per firefighter. That's because it's a $900 physical that they have to have up front. It's $3,000 for a set of compliant turnout gear if we don't have any spare gear that would fit them. We pay them their call department rate while they attend the Mass Fire Academy, which we require. And that does not include any EMT training.
Do we pay for the EMT training?
We haven't, I don't believe we've offered that to them. It may
Okay.
have been offered in the past, but not in my tenure and not recently. So you're looking at, depending upon the fire academy schedule, it could be 6 months to a year before somebody gets in class, graduates class, and actually has the skills and the training to be effective on an emergency scene. And then at that point, you're not even sure what their availability is or what percentage of calls they're going to be able to come back on. So from my perspective, it's not a reliable system, and it's not worth a $5,000 per person gamble.
So what's our total budget with respect to call firefighters?
It's approximately, let's see, 28, 29.
30,000. Yeah, 30,000.
just about 30,000. And that's why in my current budget, I actually took the line for call firefighters out and don't intend on funding the call department anymore and letting it end by attrition at the end of this fiscal year. And using and reallocating that $30,000 towards additional full-time staffing in one way, shape, or form. Because I don't believe for the amount that we invest, we get the return benefit. And it doesn't look like it's improving. And that's historic here, Essex County, throughout the country. So we are not unique in that situation.
Is Essex in trouble?
No, Essex does pretty good, only because they don't have really any full-timers. So if the call firefighters don't show up, nobody shows up.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different.
How many call firefighters have we trained who have then moved on, would you say?
Ooh, that I don't know. I haven't seen any other than the 2 that are currently here now in my tenure. I mean, there are some people on this department that I believe that definitely started out as call firefighters over the year. Lieutenant Doucette, firefighter Susie. There are a few that have moved up.
Chief, what's the staffing for Wenham? It's about our size. It's 4,800 or so.
That I don't know. I believe they only have daytime staffing. I'm
I
not
think you're
sure
right.
that they're 24/7.
Yeah, okay.
They currently don't run their ambulance, or they only run a BLS ambulance. They don't have paramedics. They have a private ambulance service for ALS.
So running the ALS ambulance sets us apart.
It does. Well, Gloucester runs paramedics also, but everybody else has private.
And is it more expensive to have the ALS in-house than to do a third-party contractor?
I don't know how you could, that's tough to address on its face.
Okay,
Because what you have here is you have paramedic firefighters.
Yep.
So they're cross-trained. So any town that just has a private service has 2 paramedics. They can provide no firefighting function whatsoever.
If you're gonna have firefighters, it makes sense to have them be EMTs.
Yes,
Because
oh, most
the-
definitely.
The
I mean,
vast
we're here, we're
majority
in
of,
town. We don't go anywhere else. We're not contracted out anywhere else. You get dedicated service.
well, but, you know, total calls, the vast majority are EMT calls. They're not
Exactly.
They're not fire calls. So
That's
if you-
correct.
If you want to get rid of the ambulance, you still need to have your 3 firefighters.
That's true. Well,
So you might
most
as well put them to
definitely.
work on the ambulance.
I've often thought that the fire department really ought to have a different name, because the emergency services that it also provides fairly extensively and most of the time, as far as I can see.
It's really fire rescue.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, okay, well, but
It's all in the branding and marketing. So,
well,
So getting back to the OT issue, so if you staff up to 4 on each shift, but then if someone's out, you fall back to 3 without backfilling the 4th, you pretty much eliminate your overtime.
it would
Not
definitely
complete.
save overtime, yes.
Not completely, but you'll reduce that large number significantly. Now, obviously, having well, at least 3 more officers, firefighters, at all in at about 100 apiece.
mhm.
So that's a 300 versus, last year we spent 260 in overtime.
So do you think you could cut that overtime down by 2/3 if you did that, Greg?
That's,
Oh,
that's-
at least, yes.
Yeah, it's
Is that what you
yeah.
think?
yeah, I think that would definitely cut it back, sure.
Well, I understand it would cut it back. I was trying to get a sense of the magnitude.
Return on investment.
Well, I think it probably about 30%, because I believe if you had 4 and you dropped to 3, you would still have 4 firefighters about 60% of the time. So it would be 30% of the time you'd be dropping to 3. Based on the accumulated overtime,
But do you need to backfill?
leave time, yeah.
Right.
You
you're
wouldn't
not
have to
backfilling.
backfill, right. So
So
you'd have to
you-
have 2 out before you put somebody on overtime. Where now if 1's out, you have to put somebody on overtime. So it gives you a cushion.
So
Plus it gives us the additional ability to have 4 on shift.
So you might save $90,000 at the current run rate in overtime, but you'd be paying $300,000 for 3 firefighters.
Can you show us your slides on the recommendation for additional staffing, chief?
Sure. So let me get to this. So here's some of the departments that were off, just as a reference, that we're often compared to based on either the size of shift or the size of community of personnel and call and what they have for people. So Chatham with 5,900 residents have 4 shifts with 6 firefighters on each and a deputy chief. And they run 3 ambulances and their budget is approximately $340,000 more than ours. Eastham, almost the exact same numbers as here. 4 shifts, they have 5 firefighters on each and a deputy chief and run 2 ambulances. Their budget is 2.8 million. Orleans, a little bit bigger, 4 shifts with 5 firefighters each, plus a full-time inspector, plus a deputy chief, $3 million budget. And Cohasset, that we've often been compared to in previous studies for multiple things, their population is much larger. They have 4 shifts, 6 each, a deputy chief, 2 ambulances, and their budget is $2.6 million. So that's just for comparison.
I just
So-
asked a question. I'm sorry. Just
Sure.
if you could go back to that last slide. I'm just looking at Chatham, about the same population, but they're running 4 shifts of 6 people.
Yep.
And their budget's about 1.84, which is not too far from where we are.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, that is a significant, I mean, that's basically 24 people versus the 12 we're talking about. How does that happen? What?
Well, I can speculate because I don't know anybody in Chatham and I didn't have a chance to call all these chiefs. But a lot of them, you directly use the ambulance revenue to offset fire department operating costs. Or
So that's
the revenue
That's
goes
a
aside.
net number.
Yes. So if it's $2.8 million and you bring in $500,000 or $750,000 in ambulance calls, that offsets that directly. It doesn't necessarily go into the general fund, or it gets put aside to buy replacement ambulances in an enterprise fund.
What
So
do
it
we
takes
do?
away costs from other locations. I don't
What do-
know that, but I know
What-
they do, you know, where they're a Seacoast Beach community, they do a lot of calls in the summer.
How do we treat revenue from ambulance calls?
It goes back to the general
I don't
fund.
know.
And I have the numbers on, this is nuts overtime, hold on. So those are number of ambulance responses and revenues generated.
Is that actual collections or billings?
My understanding is that's collections.
That's
Okay.
collection, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
2018 was a good year.
You look at this, you look
Yeah,
at this, and then you go back to the number of calls in 2018. We had all that revenue, and then we've got many more calls in 2021, and we've got substantially less revenue than 18.
But you're not seeing those calls in 18. Those weren't reported as box alarms.
well, no, these were definitely ambulance transports. There were 342 transports in 2018.
No, I know, but your 2018 number under box alarms was
Oh,
only
yeah.
100, was only 100 and something. You didn't
Yes,
include any of those.
yeah, there was, you're right, right.
But just so you're having a lot more calls with a lower proportion of transports. Is that correct? That's what it looks like.
Yeah,
It
it
looks
just-
like
it-
50% are transports.
Yeah, and it goes that way too. So we have a lot of people that, you know, you may just refuse medical care. We've responded to the scene. And then there are people that have better insurance than others. There are some that have no insurance and we don't collect on. Or it takes several years for people to pay it off. So not everything gets 100% paid. Plus, what Medicare rates have gone down over the years as to what they'll actually pay for calls too.
But your number of transports includes everyone, whether they can pay or not, right?
Yes, oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's on the backside. We, you know, that's what the
Okay.
billing company deals with primarily, so.
So it looks like it looks like for basic life support, you basically do no transports. Looks like it's
Well,
mostly
no,
ALS.
that's a misnomer.
Okay,
That's not, it could be, this 314 could be any combination of ALS, BLS calls. That's just
Okay.
how many patients we transported. If it was a broken arm, it would be a BLS call. If it was a heart attack, it'd be an ALS call. But a
Okay.
lot of times our billing is higher because we always send paramedics, which some of the skills that we normally perform make it an ALS call to start with. Because it's the level of care and the level of training of the person performing it that sometimes triggers whether it's an ALS or a BLS call.
and when we do mutual aid, do we get paid for the transports?
We do,
Okay,
we do. Because it's our call. So if we go to
Okay.
Gloucester and pick up a patient, that we do the direct billing, Gloucester is out of the picture.
okay,
We do some splits with Essex. If they do BLS and we do an ALS intercept, that's different than if we just took their patient and they weren't on the call at all.
So Maura,
Okay.
you raised a question of comparison. Looked like about $300,000 difference, but maybe that difference is really more like $550,000, given the fact that they may apply ambulance revenues to reduce the $1.8 million budget where we don't do that. So that's actually a bigger delta, isn't it?
Oh, that may be a factor here.
we don't really know is a problem.
Don't know, I apologize, I do not.
Yeah,
have
we
that
don't know
answer.
that. I understand that, but it could be a partial answer to that different staffing. I mean, that Maura was
Looking at the 68 overlapping emergency calls, when that happens, is that when you call from mutual aid? Is that how
Yes.
that works?
Yes, and those 68 overlapping calls, that could be 2 emergency medical calls, that could be 2 fire calls, that could be an emergency medical call and a fire call at the same time. But with 3 personnel, 2 people take the ambulance and would go to the medical call, and that would require 1 firefighter and or myself, if I'm here, to respond to the second call and have mutual aid respond. And it would be
So
the
if-
same for a medical call.
If you have 4 on each shift, does that decrease the
It does.
mutual aid? Okay.
It does, because if we have a second ambulance in quarters, we can handle back-to-back medical aid calls and actually do the transport. So that's the benefit. Plus, with 4 in quarters, we can send 2 pieces of fire apparatus to a call where now we can only safely take 1. So let me go back to my staffing slide that I had up here.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question? I thought I heard this. It sounds like maybe you have more equipment than people, which is probably normal.
That's
But-
standard, yes.
With 2 ambulances, are you saying that we don't have the staff to run them both simultaneously?
Correct. Because you can't
So-
run it with 1 person.
So in that case, is that a thought that we should be farming that out to a third party that could provide that?
No, because we have a mutual aid agreement and it doesn't happen all the time. And on times when it does happen, that 1 firefighter will go to the medical call, initiate primary care, and the mutual aid ambulance will come and transport the patient. So we
So
have
we
mutual aid
respond.
agreements. What's that?
So we respond.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And even if we're out of quarters, like the other night, we had the fire, Danvers was in quarters. We had a medical aid. Thankfully, you had a couple call firefighters, but if not, Danvers would have been dispatched to go with their engine. And we called Northeast Ambulance. So we work with all the local ambulance companies, as well as the local fire departments. So this is just an additional information on what the benefit is if we have 4 firefighters on duty at all times. The first one is what we've been talking about. We talked about the overlapping calls. For a fire call, we're able to send 3 firefighters on the engine and have the aerial ladder respond as well. Most local larger communities respond with 2 fully staffed engines and a staffed ladder truck on fire calls as the norm. Motor vehicle accidents, it allows us to have an incident commander, put a vehicle to block and create scene safety, and have a crew to both tend to the patient and begin stabilizing and potentially extricating a victim. Right now, a crew of 3 is stretched thin. They can only do like one of those things. They'll block the road, but they either have to do patient care or vehicle extrication, and one person there still needs to be in charge, calling for mutual aid and overseeing scene safety.
Would you have the police on scene as well? So if it was a matter of blocking traffic and assisting, wouldn't they be there to help?
They're usually there, but we use our apparatus to block because it's a much bigger block than what police do. We use an engine to block 2 lanes of traffic. And if somebody hits the engine, they're not getting through to all of us working on the other side. If you've seen some of the YouTube videos, if a police cruiser gets hit at 60 miles an hour, it ends up in the woods. But a fire truck doesn't have that issue. So we provide the primary scene safety, and they're tasked with doing the other traffic direction or whatever, but we're usually putting out cones and things like that. That's just to create a safety zone for us to work in. And as you can see, the efficiency of a 4-person crew versus a 3rd-person crew has been statistically proven again and again. That it's more efficient and also faster in achieving the goals. Aside of the 2 in, 2 out NFPA 1500 and all of that, which I know you've heard, there's some other facts there as well. The number of full-time on-duty staffing affects the ISO rating for fire insurance. So the more staff you have and the more vehicles you can get to a scene, the better your fire insurance rating is. That's just one factor that the ISO looks at. And then the last true staffing increase, to the best of my knowledge, was in 2004 when they went from 2 on shift to 3 on shift.
I thought the floater was an increase.
And
in
then the floater.
Yeah.
But as far as actual shift staffing numbers, not including a floating position, it was 2004.
Okay.
So happy to answer any questions on that.
So you've spelled out the benefits here pretty clearly, which is good. I'm still struggling with the numbers. So at roughly 100K loaded per person, to add a fourth, you're adding effectively 4 people, which is about 400K to the
Yes.
annual budget. And the hopes of that is that it would help reduce about a 200 to less than that overtime budget each year. But it looks like the overtime budget is driven predominantly by more senior people trying to use that OT. And I'm just wondering, if we're scaling up the number of people, aren't we effectively also scaling up the overtime issue? Maybe not in the first year or 2 or 3, but as we go on. I mean, it's a bigger numerator and a bigger denominator here. And
Except more, you wouldn't keep 4 on. So if one of the 4 is out on vacation or sick, you would just drop back to 3. That's where the savings comes in.
Right. I mean, my goal would be to have 4 and keep the floater, because that alleviates, that gives us the 4 staffing all the time. But the second best option would be to have 3 more additional and have 4 shifts of 4 drop to 3. Because my goal is more about having the fourth person. The ideal would be 100% of the time, because then we're the most efficient all the time. But
Yeah,
there
but
would still be about 40% of the time we would not be at 4 when we drop down to 3. So we'd have the most efficient crew 60% of the time, as opposed to 100% of the time.
So I guess it sort of comes back to what's the expectation level. So if we look at that chart of those other communities, with 4 shifts of 6 and all of that,
Yes,
there's sort of a baseline expectation that they've got 4 shifts of 6. And if they dip down below that, that's what triggers the overtime.
yes,
If we're going for 4 shifts of 3, and that's our baseline, and we're using extra employees to get rid of overtime, that starts to work out. If we adopt 4 shifts of 4, then our baseline is moved up, and then if we dip below 4 shifts of 4, we're back into using overtime again.
No, he's saying we're not going to fill that position.
No, I'm just saying long term, what is the expectation? How does this play in over time? And I think that's the question here is,
Isn't it, Jason, to go 4-4? 14 to 4?
that would be my goal to start. I mean, 5 would be phenomenal, because we could have 2 assigned to the ambulance and a 3-person engine crew. But I'm not asking for an increase to that level at this point. I'm looking for the 4, which gives us the greater efficiency. The 2 in, 2 out allows us to do a lot more than we can do with 3. Subsequent ambulance calls, subsequent fire calls. There's less injuries when you have 4-person crews than 3-person crews, and it's more efficient. So from a safety point of view, we're able to provide a better service, both EMS and firefighting, and provide a safer work environment for our firefighters. That's the primary driving factor for me, with the funding aside.
And what's this, do we still have a possibility of a SAFER grant?
So let me explain the SAFER grant for those that don't know. So the SAFER grant is offered by FEMA. It covers 100% of the salary and benefits for 3 years. This particular year, the federal government has increased the SAFER funds by $200 million. So it wasn't there last year. The $200 million isn't going to be there next year. It's only this year. FEMA's perspective in awarding the safety grant is to bring departments in line with NFPA 1710, 1720, and OSHA 2 in, 2 out. Given that we'd be looking to bring our shift staffing to 4 to satisfy the 2 in, 2 out rule, makes us a very attractive candidate to get the SAFER grant. However, the SAFER grant will only supply enough firefighters to completely meet the standard. So say you can't get a SAFER grant for one person unless you had 3 shifts of 4 and just needed that one person to get that 4th shift to 4. So they don't do it incrementally like that. They want to bring you up to the standard in one fell swoop. I know departments that have gotten as many as 8 new firefighters on a safety grant. Also, the independent outside agency studies that the town has commissioned, the MRI in 2009 and 2015 recommended using the SAFER grant to increase the full-time staffing, with the goal to be 4 firefighters on each shift. So I did put in for a SAFER grant. It has been submitted for four firefighters. So the first ideal option, the SAFER grant is in, but we won't know till May or June whether it's been awarded. And then once it's awarded, it has to be accepted. So the goal would be to hire 4 firefighters, paramedics. We would keep 4 on shift at all times. We would keep the floater to cover the vacation and sick as they do now. We gained $30,000 towards staffing by the elimination of the call department. For the 3 years, 100% of the salary and benefits are covered. If we put aside $100,000 per year into a fund for 3 years, then year 4, it's $100,000 plus the $300 we've saved. So we don't take a $400,000 hit until year 5.
And because you have the floater, could you do 3 full-time instead of 4?
We could. The second option would be 3, and then you assign the floater as the 4th shift, and we still keep our minimum of 3. So we have 4 assigned, we'll drop to 3, as Greg did. And we would have 4 firefighters on duty. We'd get that approximately 60% of the time. The other 40%, we would be at 3 firefighters, which we're at now 100% of the time.
And what would it do again to the overtime budget?
It's likely it would decrease.
It's not
The
likely, it
actual
will
number, I
decrease.
don't know, because it's still driven by storms, major events, different things like that, but
Well, if we only use,
Can't you take a look historically at what's happened? I think what Maury was trying to get at, if you don't mind me saying so, Maury, is we get the logistics of adding this person.
sure.
What do the financials look like? What is the net cost to the town?
I have not been able to narrow down the exact overtime. I know that, let's see, because it would be 60, 40, so be 40, potentially a 40% decrease in overtime.
But I thought we weren't, if you had 4 on, we weren't going to fill the position when it was down to 3, which would take away the
Right.
overtime, wouldn't it?
Right, we'll still be at 4, 60% of the time, which means we drop to 3, 40% of the time.
And that would
Right.
take away the overtime budget.
Theoretically, you have no overtime then.
Right.
Yes, more than likely. Yes,
So if you save $260,000 by spending 400,000, is that the net effect?
No, plus the 30, 290.
yeah, plus the,
You save 290,000 by spending 400, is that what we're talking about? So it's a net cost of 100,000.
But a little bit of caution there because that 260 is inflated because of an injury. Right?
well, like I
Again,
say,
don't-
it looked out, the numbers were still the same. We're still over, that number is probably a little inflated, but not as much as one would think. And it kind of evened out over the previous years without those injuries.
But the average was around 200,000, not
Yes,
260.
yes, correct. Yes, 200.
So if
Would be
you
the
take the
average.
200 and the 30, that's 230
by spending
versus 400. Right? It's costing you 170.
Well, if you're comparing it to 400, the 400 gets you, that keeps the floater.
Right. 300 brings you back down and gets rid of your overtime.
Well, I think the point is, tell us what the options are and the financial impacts are. I think what I'm hearing is if you keep the floater, the impact is 170. If you don't keep the floater, the impact is 70.
No, it would be 270, I think.
Well, I
think-
think the logic is sound that, you know, if we go up to 4-person staffing, that we could just live with the 3-person, which we have now versus the overtime. To keep it at 4, so that makes sense. So instead of using overtime to fill a floater shift, we just go with what we have now, which is 3-person
Right.
crew. That's the theory. Yeah.
Yep.
And the realized savings is the 3 years, based on the previous numbers I did, the 3 years of salary and benefits that you're not paying for 4 firefighters is over $1 million in savings over 3 years.
Yeah, I think we're trying to look at it, Chief, from the point of view that if you didn't get safer, what do we do? I mean,
Well,
what's that?
that was my.
No, let's stick, Peter, let's stick to safer.
I understand. I'm not walking away from safer. I'm just saying they're looking at
I
it with
don't
safer
think
and
we're
without safer.
finished, we're not finished with that discussion,
I
okay, on the safer. I don't want us bumping around. So if you're going to eliminate, if you're getting the safer grant and you're going to eliminate 200,000 in overtime, then while you're getting the safer grant, you can put that 200,000 aside, which will string out longer
Yes,
when you have to pony up the
yes,
additional
when the actual
300,000.
operating budget sees the full cost of the new personnel.
Okay,
So the ROI or break even period on that, Sarah, I think is about a 4-year mark. So about 4 years out is when you kind of reconcile all this and say, where did we end up? I think.
it should go longer. If he's saying, under
Well,
his scenario, he's saying you put aside 100,000 a year. And then you have to pay up in year,
Yeah, so if you put 100,000 a year away a year for 3 years, you have 300,000 in reserve. So year 4, when that 300,000 appears as a salary line item in the operating budget, that 300,000 comes out of the fund and takes that out.
yeah, but if you're
And then
saying,
year
you're-
5, that's when you see the full 300,000 show up in the budget.
but if
But
you're
you're not counting
saying
the
it's
200 savings.
if you're saying
Yes.
it's costing you 200 in overtime, then you're putting 200,000 away a year.
You could choose to do that. Yeah, certainly.
which takes you out longer.
Which
Gives
would take you out longer.
600,000, gives you another year.
It gives you another year, correct?
But again, it just comes to what is the net difference between the two alternatives, and whether you do it 1 year or the next year. It's, what's the savings versus the
And-
cost of the 4 new people?
I do think we'll need to maintain some amount of overtime, just, to
Mhm.
keep our current
Yes.
firefighters happy.
Yep.
They
Yep.
require some, yeah.
I'm
that's
not
the other-
worried.
You're gonna have associated costs here, turnout gear that we see all the time, and
Yep.
other personal items that for every new firefighter. So again, I would like to see what is the net.
If
Cost
you,
of adding
you
four
can, you can
people.
estimate about $3,000 a firefighter for turnout gear.
And training,
So that'd be 9,000. Training, if they're full-time, they go to the academy as if they were working in the station. So they get paid their regular duty shift money.
So we
But-
don't pay for the academy, correct?
The academy doesn't cost us anything. We
Okay.
just send the firefighters.
Okay.
So they could either be on shift here doing in-house training like we did with Brian until the academy became available. And then they're at the academy as if they were on shift. And then when they come back after being trained, they get assigned to the shift and they work. And then the full measure of the full 4-person shift is realized.
Until they go to Gloucester, which, by the way, I saw, Maury, we've talked about this in the past, and I saw a news item within the last 2 days of one community in Western Massachusetts. What they do, pay a bonus? But
exactly.
Oh, yeah. New Hampshire has started that as well.
Yep.
There are police departments and fire departments in New Hampshire that are so short-staffed and there's so few people to pick from. They're offering signing bonuses.
Well, this is sort of a
So these
question
were-
I had, Chief, which is if we go to 4 shifts of 4, will you be able to find people, given that maybe Gloucester is a more attractive place to work and whatever? Or are we going to start seeing a flow through where people come, train, move on? And what do you think of that?
I don't anticipate that because people that would come here would want to come here for the amount of calls, for the fact that we run an ALS ambulance. I know that there are people out there that would come here. I know of a couple people already that would be doing that. And mostly if you're a firefighter paramedic right now and you're on the civil service test, you can go wherever you want. So if they're choosing not to go to other places and come here, it's because they want to be here. So I know it is going to be difficult because a lot of the paramedics have already been scooped up, and that's our minimum requirement, that you are a firefighter paramedic. We don't have the luxury to bring somebody in and pay $12,000 and wait 2 years for them to become a paramedic. That's just not cost effective. But part of the reason you're seeing a problem with the private ambulance services meeting their contracts is a lot of those private ambulance service paramedics are now getting scooped up and going to full-time fire service-based EMS.
Because they're paid more?
Paid more, better retirement, better hours.
Okay.
So. Now, where I put in for 4 full-time firefighters, if we were to get the grant and it was to be accepted, you could accept 3 out of the 4 and not have to take all 4. Because 3 with the floater would meet the minimum standard that they would be interested in.
And they wouldn't take exception with the SAFER grant that if, instead of overtime with the 4, we'd still have 3 when, we have sickness or something? That
Yeah,
would-
no, we've discussed that.
Okay,
We've
SAFER grant.
discussed the possible benefits and pitfalls, the same as we discussed the 56-hour work week. So anecdotally, this was from one of the firefighters who responded first due to the fire at Old Essex Road, and he talked about how much more effective we would have been with a 4-person crew than a 3-person crew. So this is from a line firefighter explaining how we would have approached the scene differently. Because it was 9:30 on a Saturday night, I was at home. So I'm coming from Gloucester. And when the on-duty shifts were beefed up during COVID to 4, it was to rave reviews, and they were very happy about how effective they could do and handle multiple calls and things like that prior to me getting here. When Chief Beardsley was here and beefed up the staffing during the initial phases of COVID to handle the calls. It was a marked difference with 4 on shift than with 3 from an internal perspective.
So Greg, could we do a budget on the assumption that we would have 3 new positions and have the SAFER grant? And if the SAFER grant doesn't come through, we don't fund it for 2023?
Yes, I mean, your out-of-pocket expense is really just the equipment for the new firefighters. So if we don't really need to budget that much more new money, if you're counting on this, on the grant.
Right, we shouldn't have to budget anymore. It should be less. I mean, we should be able to be constant.
Yeah, actually, you would be less because you'd be reducing your
Right,
OT.
but you can't do that for 2023 budget if you don't know when you pass the budget whether you're going to get the SAFER grant.
Right.
Right,
So, I mean, in essence, you would keep the status quo budget.
yeah,
And if SAFER comes through, then that basically pays for, obviously, the additional staffing, and you would have some savings in your OT, and you'd have a little higher expense in some equipment for the new officers.
Here's one question I have or a concern. If we bank on the SAFER grant and don't get it, or we get the SAFER grant and the town decides not to accept it for one reason or another, then there is no placeholder in the budget to even add an additional firefighter in this next year as a second floater to work our way towards a SAFER grant the following year to get the 2 remaining firefighters we need to get up to 4 a shift. So it seems like it would end up being an all or nothing gamble. It's either the SAFER grant or no more staffing for another year. And I know this 4 staffing has been on the table for several chiefs prior to me. And I'd like to see some movement either one way or the other to help us achieve that goal. But if there's no extra money, even a salary placeholder that could then maybe be pulled out and put into a fund to go towards the SAFER grant payment, if we got it, and then if we didn't, I have at least money in there to hire 1 new firefighter as a second floater. And then go for the SAFER grant the following year for 2 firefighters, and then we have 4 in a shift. I just think it's a gamble because you never know whether you're going to get the grant or not, and it's not given money right now. And I would hate to lose anything or any opportunity to increase staffing on that gamble.
well, Greg, it seems to me that we need, I mean, we're getting requests for extra people in a lot of departments. Right,
Right, so you got the
police,
You got the 1 extra in the police. You have, 1 to 4 here. And then the other one is with Board of Health moving to either a part-time or full-time in-house health agent. And you'll hear about that one next week.
Greg, I'm wondering if mechanically, is this something worth maybe thinking about as a separate warrant article? And I know operating budgets, you want to have the whole operating budget under Article 4. But what we're sort of talking about here is a pretty significant increase to the annual budget on an annual year, and safer aside. And I wonder if that gives you the latitude to, if the safer grant comes through, it's cleaner, and if it doesn't come through, the warrant article just, if it's handled as a separate item out of the budget, then it sits on its own. I don't know if that makes sense.
I guess I'm concerned about increasing that number of firefighters without the safer grant.
So
Yeah,
you
I don't
make
think that-
you make the article dependent upon the winning the safer grant, Sarah.
That's what I think. I mean, I just don't see, I mean, unless Greg can come through with a budget that, supports it, I don't see how we can support it. I don't understand where we're going to get the money from.
My contention would be, and I don't know if this makes a difference, is safer grant except 3. If that doesn't come, fund 1. And then add 1 additional firefighter into the operating budget for the following year, and then try safer again next year for 2, rather
But then-
than no firefighters or 3 firefighters,
But
because
then
it
we
still
have,
moves it in on a gradual period of time.
but then we have an extra firefighter in the extra budget for a firefighter if we get the safer grant. So we're putting aside, we're charging people money on their taxes that we're not going to spend if we get the safer grant. And I just have an issue with that as a
So you
contingency.
could, that's where Maury's idea might come into play. You could do a standalone article, $100,000 to the fire department if the safer grant is not successful.
Exactly.
Can you do that as an operating item? That
Yeah,
way?
you can,
Yeah, okay.
because we don't set the taxes until, in the fall.
That sounds excellent from my perspective. I appreciate that can be done.
But,
I don't-
and what's the duration of the safer grant? I'm sorry, I missed the first part of it.
3 years, 100% salary and benefits covered.
And then at the end of 3 years, it's
It's
just
100%.
100% to the town.
Previously,
it's-
the safer grants were decreasing amounts, 100,000, 75, 50, 25, and then the full amount. But for the past couple of years, they've gone to 100% for 3 years. That's their new format.
And Andy, I don't know if you missed it, but the expectation is in year 4, it'd be offset by a reduction. There'd be a reduction in overtime and reduction in the call firefighter budget,
Okay,
because we wouldn't have the overtime. And he's talking about eliminating call firefighters through attrition by the end of 2023.
No, by the end of this year. Before this budget goes into effect. That's why I've already taken the $30,000.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So in essence, the $30,000 I removed in the budget got moved to the $30,000 in overtime by Greg.
Okay.
That's kind of like the offset currently.
Okay, got it.
Right, that's,
The savings in overtime begins as soon as we get these people on board. It doesn't have to wait till the end of the safer thing.
Right.
Right. And the goal would be, if we did get the safer grant, which would likely be in May or June, to get the firefighters up and running as soon as possible.
Yeah. And you say you have a cadre of people that are interested already?
I know people that are interested. I would still then have to put out the posting and get an application and an assessment center and all of that in place, potentially to go as soon as we got the word that we were hiring. Otherwise, I have to go through that, spend the money, and then have a eligibility list standing by. Although in years past, eligibility lists lasted a long period of time, and you could go back to the list and call people. In the current environment, eligibility lists aren't lasting. People are getting picked up because there's so many open jobs. So it'd have to be like a 1-2 punch.
So I
The
think-
only other thing, while we're still on staffing and funding, the only other thing I'll bring up, and I know, Sarah, you brought it up in your email to me. I don't know whether that's something you're gonna bring up later about dispatch.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
So this is another potential solution that I didn't create that is currently sitting on the table, as you're well aware. If we go to regional, it's a $3.5 million savings over 10 years, which would easily offset all of my costs. And even if we take and reallocate the $350,000 that currently costs for the dispatch operating budget and split it between fire and police, that's $175,000 apiece to cover one additional firefighter request and one additional police officer request. Not to mention all the savings in the future capital items, which we haven't gotten to yet. So I know I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but there are other solutions out there to help some of these staffing problems.
And Greg, where are we on that? Oh, I guess this is an item for discussion tonight, I guess.
We should be getting the feasibility study any day.
And that's going to be a separate warrant article, right?
Yes, that's the idea.
But we're talking a year out on savings, right?
Yes.
So the warrant article doesn't really have money attached to it. It's just a decision.
Well, if the decision is to stay in-house, there would be dollars attached to move forward with some of the improvements that are needed.
So Greg, are you thinking that the dispatch could be on the first Springtown meeting? Or if you potentially split up into two meetings, would it be on the second, or are you thinking it would move to the fall, or what's the time frame on this one?
Yep, first or second, so either the April or the June.
Interesting.
And so when you have these separate warrant articles, where's the money coming from?
It's just an additional appropriation. So we do things like that now, and we have the appropriation for OPEB as a standalone article, for example.
So you
So it's
include
not-
it in the budget. You include it in the budget as just as a separate item?
Right, it's voted separately, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we put it all together as when we look at the total budget, but
Okay.
it's voted separately.
But we don't have any of that yet.
But then we get to the end of town meeting, and if one or two things has been voted up and one or two things are voted down, Greg and team get going with their calculators, I think, right, for the last article, which is essentially,
It's only if it goes up.
it's only if it goes up, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's only if it goes up and goes over the levy limit, right?
Right, I was just gonna say, because we have some excess capacity.
Yeah.
It just means it's a higher tax rate.
Right.
You don't need to tap fund balance if you don't want to. Well,
Right.
obviously you can.
So this is we've been all over on this topic, over the years. From on one hand, Greg, you've been there for all that, and Chief Cleary is maybe new to it, but
Very
it
nice.
was a few years back where there was a study done by one of our members, trying to compare it to different towns and sort of making the overall point that that Manchester was kind of over budgeted, overstaffed, and so that's kind of lingering, and the memories of some of us that were there at that time. And, but we also understand, the real staffing challenges that we've heard, not just from you, but from your predecessor. And just internally, that's kind of, I've got those two thoughts, kind of rattling around in my head, while at the same time, we're sort of, it sounds like, we finally are reaching the, we've heard the death knell for volunteer firefighters as of the end of the year.
Yep.
So there's no question that this provides, if you go to the 4 on, that is a premium service for a town of 5,500. You won't find a lot of towns at 5,500 with 16 firefighters. But that's a service that it seems voters put a premium on. They certainly have supported the ALS, and that's we get a lot of praise for those ALS calls.
Yep.
The crew does a very good job, and people are extremely thankful for that service. But it is a premium service. There's no question about it.
Yep.
And I will add, if you look at it, and the guys here do an excellent job. They are dedicated. If you talk to some of the other departments that are dealing with private ambulance services that are having staffing issues, they're waiting 16, 20 minutes for an ambulance on average in some of these communities, because it's coming from 2 or 3 towns away. And that's becoming a standard, that these departments are reviewing their actual performance metrics with these departments, because they're just not able to keep up with the demand. And thankfully we do.
Are we running 1 or 2 ambulances now? Because it was never the intent to run 2 when.
Well, we currently have one. We currently have 1 full-time running ambulance. The reserve ambulance is still being evaluated for roadworthiness. I put a lot of money into it last year for repairs, and it is still not where it needs to be. So that's when last year I started putting money away, or asked to put money away for a replacement ambulance in 5 years, because that runs the most, and that's the one that needs to be the top of the line. So my goal is to have 1 more designated mechanic that I've identified, take a look at this and see with minimal work that this can become a viable spare. Not only to run second ambulance calls, but currently now, if our current ambulance needs to go out for repairs, we do not have a spare. So when it has to go out.
If they both go out, you won't have one either. We had this discussion 6 months ago, but it was never the intent at the town meeting that approved the ALS ambulance, which was now approximately 10 years ago, if the then existing ambulance would continue to be in service. We were going to have 1 ambulance with the elevated service. And as we discussed,
Okay.
we keep going down the road here and have 2 ambulances or 3 ambulances and tell people that way you'll get quicker service. But again, that wasn't the intent. And I would be amazed if that vehicle could make it to Singing Beach at this point.
Yeah, well, that's why the plan is to get another ambulance, and when that new ambulance comes, this current one goes in reserve.
Yeah, I got it.
Because especially if our staffing goes up to 4, that makes it much more viable than it even is now.
Yeah, but now you're adding we're just adding and adding and adding to the cost. I thought that we had a conversation about not needing a second ambulance because you could outfit one of your.
Right, what that other one
Pieces
does
of
though, that's a
equipment.
non-transporting vehicle. All that does is get the equipment and 1 person to the scene with 3-person staffing, and we're still calling for an out-of-town ambulance to do the transport. So
Which is
we don't
fine.
get the billing money in the transport. It just gives us more tools to bring to start more ALS care till an out-of-town ambulance gets there.
Right,
But I'm
Chief,
telling you, it's taking out-of-town ambulance is now 16 to 20 minutes to get to mutual aid ambulance calls.
But how many do we need? I mean, you could say we need 10. I mean, it's just.
No,
it's
I wouldn't
morphing.
say 10.
Morphing.
I would not say 10.
I mean, I can't support going to adding 3 firefighters on the basis that it gives us the ability to run a second ambulance.
That's only one benefit from it. Again, it's about firefighter safety and what services we can perform in the field, both on EMS calls as well as fire calls. That's the driving factor from an operational perspective.
And that will always be the case with adding professional firefighters. The question is, given that, and given the financial impact of that, given where we are as a town, we have to balance those off.
Sure, I understand. Yep.
And I'm just saying that at that town meeting, there was never any anticipation that there would be a second ambulance. That was something that just evolved and now continues to perhaps grow. And I just think that people didn't make any decision about that.
The fire department, I mean, the finance committee never approved that second ambulance to be equipped.
It sort of became what was the value to trade it in? Let's hold on to it as a backup, not equip it. And then over each successive year, it became more and more equipped. And then has eventually evolved to the point where it needs to meet some level of certification. I think this is all dancing around what I tried to ask about earlier and didn't ask it very succinctly, which is really about the expectations. If the plan is to have, 4 shifts of 4, and somebody is out or sick or whatever, injured, and you end up going down to 4 shifts of 3, then how quickly does overtime kick in? And I think what we're trying to talk about here is how to provide service and how to minimize overtime. And if the expectation is more people, more time, more overtime, we're just kind of adding to the problem. So I think it's really about what's the baseline expectation for staffing that we're looking for here. And if we're trying to maintain 4 shifts of 3 and say 60% of the time, 4 shifts of 4, that's great. If we're trying to do 4 shifts of 4, 100% of the time and doing essentially 16 people plus a floater, we're just, to Mark's point, we're just escalating here. And at what point do you sort of say, whoa, how do we balance this?
Are there any provisions in the contract with respect to overtime?
With respect to what about overtime?
A right to overtime?
Yeah. There's no right.
No,
to
there's like no minimum that you're guaranteed this many hours overtime is, no, it's not guaranteed to any number of shifts, amount of money.
It just determines who gets it first.
Yeah,
The
they
pecking
do
order,
have
yeah.
internal
Okay.
rules as to who's eligible and how it rotates, fair and equitable, yes.
Okay,
The shifts and the hours are covered and are contractual.
yep.
But there's no promise of overtime.
Okay, let's move on to capital.
Sure. How would you like to approach that, or what would you like to know? I'm all ears.
So in your capital budget, you have an enormous number of things, but they're spread out over a number of years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what's your thought process behind that?
based on immediate need versus future need. They're all items that, well, we can go right through them here. The LifePak defibrillator. We currently have two. One is still fairly new and under service contract. The other one is no longer supported or replaceable. And we could use it to trade it in towards a new one.
And something like this, you can't get a grant for, is that correct? I mean, you get a lot of grants.
You can. I'll go into what I put in for grants for afterwards, because again, grants aren't guaranteed.
Okay,
But yes, so some of these, as grants become, they could be taken up and not need to be used on capital if we actually get the grants.
okay.
So this is one of our primary tools on every call out the door on the ambulance. So the second one is reporting software. This is another one that goes in conjunction with dispatch. Our current reporting software stopped being supported as of December 31st of last year, which means the platform we have can't be upgraded. We're just paying to maintain it at this point. So we need to get new reporting software. If we do go to the regional dispatch center, they provide us software free of charge. That's integrated with their CAD system. But if that's still another year out, we can't wait another year in order to get reporting software.
So your
And this-
current,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry, Chief, your current software, even though it's not supported, but it's still active, couldn't bridge the gap if it were another year.
No, we've been having a ton of issues with it. We've had IT in here 4 times in the past 2 weeks.
Okay,
It's using up the server. It's very outdated. It doesn't give us the data that we need to run statistics. It's very archaic at this point. It's enough to get
That's right.
by for the short term, but. And the different packages we're looking at would be directly integrated with either the dispatch software they'd be buying if dispatch stays in town, or it would be directly applicable to the software at the regional.
Okay.
So it would fit both of those bills.
Do small towns like Essex and other smaller departments and smaller communities use software of this magnitude, or are there different grades of it?
There are different modules you can buy for a lot of this software, depending upon what you need it for. This would have something that would allow us to do inspections. It would be readily integratable with our iPads as far as GPS and pre-plans. So it's a very robust one. A lot of the other departments in Essex County, one of the programs I'm looking at, already use it. And it shares data across fire departments. So if we went mutual aid to another department that have this, it would pull up all the information about the building we were going to, all their hydrants, and it would be the same if they came to Manchester.
Mhm.
So it comes highly recommended from other departments in Essex County that have been using it for a while, at least one of the primary ones that I've investigated so far. And it may have expandability to do calendars as well as take over other programs we're using for calendars and other ones we're using for payroll. So it may be able to do take the place of a couple other pieces of software that we have as well. So the other one, this is the yearly allotment for station renovations and maintenance to keep up with the aging building. This was in place before I got here, but we tap into it all the time. It's very helpful.
Do you have unexpended funds from prior fiscal years?
Yes, a couple we do. The challenge is at $30,000, sometimes we have to let it build up in order to actually use it for a significant renovation. Otherwise, we use lesser amounts to supplement the building maintenance budget when that gets overspent due to unforeseen circumstances.
Do you know what that balance is at this point?
Yeah, let me pull that up for you. Hold on just a second. You'll indulge me as I change screens. Find it here. Master budget. I had it up and then it disappeared. Let me see where it is here. I have. Let me see where I have that here. Okay. It currently has $63,980 in it.
And do you have a 5-year plan regarding what you plan to do each year?
A 5-year plan for what?
What renovations you intend to do?
No, because I'd spoken and Peter's familiar with this, that spoken rather than use it as Band-Aids, I would love to see about at some point getting a study that prioritizes things, that looks for renovations, that solves some of our bigger problems. But as of right now, it's used as a maintenance fund. Because any of the significant renovations would be a lot more money than what we have in there and a lot more than we get. To increase space, to put on a second floor if we were going to do any major renovations. And I know in talking with Greg, that's not in the plans for at least 6 to 10 years. So right now we use it for minor renovations and repairs as they go along.
And what's your list of do you have a list of minor renovations that need to be done? That you could
Yeah, there's a
provide
lot
us?
of things we need. Well, a lot of them are some of the other capital items, which is why those are individual capital items, because this doesn't cover all those costs. But generators, compressors, SCBA systems, heating systems, fire alarm systems, they're all extremely big ticket items. And a lot of them have engineering components that go with other items, like HVAC with new boilers, like air conditioning, like better heating system. So at some point, I'll be looking for guidance and direction of how much money we want to put into this building and how much should be for potential future building or for a major renovation of this building. I know there was a study done in 2013 that had a 3-phase renovation plan for the building, but only the first 4 components of the first phase of the plan were ever funded.
Yeah, I'm just struggling with why we're putting 30,000 a year around into 30,000 years into some type of a bucket. And then we also have all these other additional requests. I don't understand why we're doing both.
Well, what I would probably suggest then, maybe like we did with the gear, that if this money got moved into the station maintenance fund, because that's where it's used, then it doesn't have to be listed as a capital item on a recurring basis. I can just add that in as a line item under my operating expenses. But it's used to replace, when I run out of money, when we have major things, we had our Plimo vent system for our vehicle exhaust system go. That was a $3,000 fix that we weren't planning on.
Right.
So those are the types of things that pop up based on the nature and age of the things in the building. We had to have significant electrical work done because we didn't have enough outlets for computers and radios. We had one plug.
Okay, let's go on to the next item.
Sure.
Well, let me just say that I think, and Greg's still on, I don't see him on the screen, but there is a facilities study request for funding that I assume would take care of an evaluation of the fire department building that would say, these are the things that have to happen if you're going to stay in this building in the near, middle, and long term, versus this is what it would cost to build a new fire station. Is that correct, Greg? That study would cover those items?
Yes, correct.
Great.
Right.
That'd be awesome. I'd welcome that. That helps give direction. So that's perfect.
Last we provide.
There you go. Appreciate that. So this is one of the major systems, the station generator. It's 20+ years old. It's unable to power the entire station and all the required systems. On the last power outage, I had to move all my electronics in my office into a power strip to plug into a single outlet because it's the only one in my office that gets emergency power. A lot of our major systems here are on uninterrupted power systems because the generator doesn't cover that section of the building.
So this is listed in fiscal year 2024.
Yes.
Okay.
And in talking with like Nate DeRozier's, when we put it out to bid, this is likely something that if still new and we were to move to a new facility, it could move with us. That would be part of the design and putting it in, just looking down the line, not knowing how many years out. And in the 2013 building study for renovation by MRI, the generator's weaknesses were enumerated at that time, and that was one of the things that was going to be taken care of as part of the renovations at that time. So it was not sufficient 9 years ago, and it's even less so now with the increased electronics we have in the building.
So not 9 years ago, that generator would have been 11 years old and it was obsolete for our needs?
It was never put in to power the amount of buildings that we have. There are literally rooms that are not on the generator. And in talking with Manchester Electric, it would need a whole new service in from the generator and a whole new panel in order to power everything we need to have powered.
That I understand. I know that one, but
Is the building-
somebody made a judgment about what the generator needed to generate power for. That's
Or a
Is the building,
misjudgment.
Is the building heated electrically or is there a boiler? to
We
heat
have
this
two
building?
boilers.
Is it gas?
We have gas and we have oil, I believe. They're looking to convert it all over at one point or another, but we don't have any air conditioning. So we don't have a central HVAC unit. We have a couple of remote heaters out on the apparatus floor that really don't work or work well. And then we use window air conditioners in the summer.
Yeah, that's a lot of generator for a building. I'm just surprised. I would think you could sell power to other buildings in town.
Yeah, no. I would buy power from other buildings in town if I could. So the next is an annual allotment of funds for the apparatus purchase, which you guys are familiar with.
Mhm.
How much is now in that fund?
That fund is now. It keeps jumping on my screen for me here. Why does it do that? I'm juggling 2 screens and 6 pre-designated pop-ups here. So if you indulge me for a minute.
only one outlet.
So, yeah, we had like one outlet on each wall. We ended up having to put in,
Looks to me like
6.
there's 965,000 in it.
there is 965,000. You are correct.
That's in the capital budget cost, total cost to date line.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Is there a target that we try to save to in that account?
Well, the target needs to take into account the potential of and I'll get into it when I talk about the specific vehicle replacements, but the thought of replacing an aerial ladder would be about $1 million, 1.2 million in 2026. About $400,000 for an ambulance in 2025, 2026. A new engine would probably run about $600,000 in 2031. And a new command car would probably be about $75,000 in 2027. So I have the different vehicles there in the years, but those are some of the numbers that things are running these days.
Mhm. And I think you said the ladder was first of that on that list.
Well, the ladder is theoretically first on the list. as each year goes by and repairs are done and I see how the department operates, that's not hard and fast that might be the first one or be the most beneficial to replace, or whether we would need one at that point. Staffing plays into that, and in the condition of the vehicle and what we're able to design for the demographics of Manchester.
So what's the most likely vehicle to be first? I hear you saying
The
that.
most likely vehicle to be purchased first would probably be an ambulance in conjunction with the ladder truck around the same time. Although it's about a year and a half build out for either one. So once we've identified which ones we're going with when, we would have to start the design process in order to get them in a timely manner.
And I think you said that was around 26 or 7.
26 for the ladder and either 25 or 26 for the ambulance. I have it enumerated a little farther down.
And that's probably about $1.8 million.
Yeah, million six probably.
Okay.
Now, there are options. There are lease options. There are buying a demonstrator model option. There are, those are, again, just round numbers. So 2025, looking for NFPA compliant gear washer and extractor and drying rack. This will wash out turnout gear to get rid of carcinogens or blood or any soil and reduce the cancer risk to firefighters. We have a generic commercial washer downstairs that's 20 years old, and we have no drying rack. Our drying rack is to hang everything on hangers from the pipes in the boiler room till they're dry. But the drying rack specifically is to dry them from the inside out and to put them back in service quickly. And the extractors are rated specifically for turnout gear and to be able to wash the carcinogens out of them before we put them back into service.
Chief, looking at the multi-year capital improvement, do we intend not to put money into the engine fund in 24 and 25?
I had the same amount for all of it. I had not altered it, if I remember correctly, from what I submitted. I don't know, Greg, is that correct? Because I don't remember leaving anything out.
I zeroed out a couple of years just because of other needs that were coming up.
So
And I
roughly
think-
we'll add about 350 to our current balance in that period of time.
Right.
Yeah.
This was a cost of money issue too, that we didn't really want to be holding on to all this money, that we probably just need to do a bond when we need the equipment,
Yeah.
I believe.
Sure. The next one is our breathing air compressor and SCBA fill station. Refills our breathing apparatus. Current one we have is 20 years old. A compressor has a broken circuit board and doesn't work automatically to keep the system filled and working. The technicians have looked at it. There are parts no longer available. So one more failure on the compressor and it's out of service permanently.
And then what do you do?
I come back to you and say I need a compressor tomorrow because I don't have one that broke today. We use the air packs. We check them several times a week, so we bleed them down. They have to be refilled. The only other option in the short term, we would have to load up the truck, load up the pickup truck with bottles and drive to another department to fill them. Which either I'd have to pay somebody overtime to do that, or it would reduce my shift strength to send somebody out of town to do that. So one of the large cylinders that's in the reserve bank constantly leaks, doesn't remain up to operating pressure. And the current model we have will not be compatible with the new air packs we'll need to purchase in 2025, 2026. It will be incapable of filling them to the pressures that they need to be. So the thinking in 2024 is we would have it, be able to come familiar with it before we would actually need to use it for new air packs. You'll see a common number keep coming up in all these major systems is the 20+ years old. So most of these things are at or beyond their recommended life. They're still being inspected, and if they're approved, we're still using them. But many of them are one small failure away from being useless. So this is a station compressor. We have one in the basement. It's really old. It still works. It used to fill the air tank so that we could run the horns on the roof, so we no longer have that need. But it does also keep the pressure up in the air brakes and the air systems in the trucks. And there are smaller, much more efficient units available that we could replace that one with. And it also powers up our Plymo vent system to keep the hoses attached to the exhaust pipes of the apparatus. (2025-26). In 2025, we have a few bottles that need to be replaced because they will have reached their hydro life and will have to be taken out of service. So there's a small purchase in 2025, or a smaller purchase for bottles. And then in 2026, we will need all new packs, masks, and bottles.
Does each person have their own? Or?
They're mounted in the apparatus in the
Okay.
riding positions.
Okay,
So all the trucks have them, including my command car.
and this 200,000 is,
2026.
okay, so that's replacing them all.
Yes, that's
Okay.
replacing all the harnesses, bottles, masks.
Okay,
And then there's a few bottles that need to be replaced in 2025.
okay.
And then 2024 and 2027, there's a small item in there, 2024 for radios. And 2027 would likely be replacing out some of the radios. And again, this is all incumbent. If we were to go to regional dispatch, they would upgrade all our radios, our iPads, and our mobile radios and portable radios for free. If we stay, that's why I have them in the capital plan. So this is the tentative proposed fleet replacement schedule. A couple of it, again, is variable, depending upon, you know, how things do and how they maintain. Again, ladder 2 was supposed to be replaced this year, and we're trying to get 5 at 2021, so we're trying to get 5 additional years out of it. We put significant repairs into it recently to keep it going. It was normal rust repair and things like that. Again, it's more useful to us if we have increased staffing, because we can use it on more calls and it can fulfill more roles. The engine and ladder may flip-flop. We may not need the ladder as soon, and we might want to get the engine sooner because it allows us to put our engine 1 in reserve. So it gives us 2 full-sized pumpers, both a frontline one and a reserve one, where right now our reserve quote-unquote pumpers are the ladder and the squad, which only have 400 gallons of water, where engine 1 has 750 gallons. And a new engine would have at least 750 gallons. So right now, when engine 1 goes out for repairs and we use the ladder and the squad, neither one of them equals the water capacity of engine 1, which reduces our effectiveness arriving on scene at a fire. And then depending upon what we decide on squad 3, that type of vehicle is becoming very popular with other types of departments. So it may have a high value as a trade-in, or to sell it and use that money to help offset the cost of a new engine 1. And then our current engine 1 would take the place of the squad.
I think the squad's cute.
The squad doesn't know what it wants to be when it grows up. So again, this is just some more information on, this is pretty much what I just said, so. Again, the ambulance gets the most use because we do the more EMS calls than fire calls. The aerial ladder has function, but not if it can't be staffed or get to a scene. So that has to be taken into consideration. A spare engine, the goal is to have another one with at least 750 gallons of water to supplement the first one and also serve, the current one can serve as a spare when the primary one goes out for any maintenance issues. New command vehicle. Hope to get some more years out of my vehicle. At that point, we can evaluate the efficacy of that vehicle. But if the squad goes away, then keeping my vehicle as a vehicle for the officer to use for inspections or something like that, or people to take to training or things like that, wouldn't be bad to hold on to. But we could cross that bridge when we come to it. And likely the replacement would need to be an Expedition or a Tahoe, something a little bigger than an Explorer, because mine is currently busting at the seams. And I believe that's all I have, unless you folks have any more questions.
Anybody have any questions on the capital items?
I was wondering if we'd done any kind of look at the value of holding on to these for spares versus replacing them or trading them in. I mean, if we hold on to the engine one after we get a new one, aren't we going to need a bigger fire station eventually? Versus, you know,
Well,
would we get some kind of money if we were to trade that in when we get a new one?
it would depend. We would certainly evaluate the trade-in value at that point. But again, if we have only one frontline engine and it needs to go out for repairs, then we don't have an engine.
Right.
That's
There's value there. Absolutely.
yeah, there is some value. And not holding on to junk, mind you, but if it becomes reserve while it's still viable, and that's when we replace it, that's when we get the most use out of it. So then maybe by the time it's totally reached of having no value, it's time again to purchase another frontline engine if it's staggered correctly. But I'm not a firm believer in holding on junk just because, but if we can get use out of it and it's still viable. And then
I
trade
know
could
it's-
certainly be
yeah.
considered.
With cars, they'll tend to inflate the value they give you for the trade-in because they want you to buy the new one. That might not be a case in the fire department, but
Yeah, well, I mean, municipally, it may or may not be. But I know in the used fire truck market, being a collector, you can buy a used fire truck that just came out of service yesterday for $5,000 and drive it away. The market is just flooded with used apparatus. So
there you go.
definitely a buyer's market, not a seller's market. And a lot of them are going for scrap value. Similar to a car, when you're bringing in after 100,000 miles, you get the wholesale value on it, and that's about it. So $5,000 for an engine, taking it off the price of a $600,000 engine really doesn't amount to a whole lot.
Okay.
Any other questions of the fire chief? Well, thank you, Chief Cleary.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate all the questions. If you have any more questions or would like any more information, please just reach out to me and I'll be happy to provide it.
Okay, thank you.
Great,
All right,
thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Chief.
Chief.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda, Maury asked me to add, it's to discuss the 40B project town council projected costs. Maury, do you want to? Address-
Yeah, I'm probably
Okay.
sounding a little bit like a broken record on this, because I think this is probably the third go around, but I just have this concern that the town is facing a very steep learning curve on this 40B project, the proposed 40B project. And I just want to make sure that we're putting the right amount of resources and the correct resources on this issue. And I guess I've brought up in the past, if we have the right person on the team legally, and I think some people are talking about that. I guess the question too is there enough money to properly represent and do what the town needs to do here? And I'm just sort of thinking about this from the point of view of what happens over the next 6 months, year is going to leverage significantly a number of things going on in the town with this sort of 40B type projects and others that may come along with it behind it. So I just toss it out if we are doing this project and this learning curve justice right now. So.
And Sarah, do you have some thought on this?
Well, I have to be a little careful. I think that we have hired a law firm to provide us with legal services to the town for all aspects of the business. And the law firm is responsible for assigning people to various projects as they come up. I am at the point right now where I think that we've turned the corner with the existing attorney that's supporting us for the 40B project. And I think it would be more disruptive to attempt to switch gears at this point in time. I wouldn't be comfortable with it, but that's my personal opinion. It impacts me personally, so that's what I have to say.
So is this a question of amount of service or the quality of service? Maureen.
I think it's a very, very long road. And I think as Greg mentioned in the last meeting or a prior meeting, there's many different steps here. And there may be even some concern or some question about whether this even comes to being, and it may get tied up in litigation and whatever for a long time. I think the question that should be asked is, if somebody's going to litigate this, who would it be? I think there's a natural assumption that 1 or 2 or 3 organizations out there, private citizens, may take this on. But in fact, if you look at the record of who's been litigating these types of things over time, it's not for the faint of heart. And it's not necessarily a shoo-in that somebody's going to step up and do this. So, and I think part of it is what goes on right now with the town, how the town handles this issue, how the town gathers information, and how the decisions get made shapes the platform or shapes the landing for what may come next, if anything comes next. So I just have watched a couple of ZBA meetings. Sarah, I agree with you. I did watch the meeting last night for a while. And it looked better. It looked much better than prior meetings, but you know, the town is trying to learn something and trying to work through a project here with people who are very seasoned professionals on this. And at the end of the day, as I've said before, it would be a shame if we looked back and said, we should have done this or we should have done that, and we chose not to, and we ended up in a different place than we wanted to be.
But I think the challenge is that the review of the comprehensive permit is completely different from the negotiations with the Board of Selectmen. And the goal of the meetings is to not engage the applicant. The goal is to collect the information, look at the information, ask the applicant for additional information on the record, receive responses to those requests, and then take all of that information and make a determination as to how to deal with each component of the permit. We're not negotiating with the applicant like the Board of Selectmen was. And therefore, we don't want somebody who's going to engage the applicant in these meetings. That's what we're trying to tone down.
Yeah.
Greg, do you have any comment?
So I do think it's going in the right direction. And I just want to emphasize again that it is a team that we have. And even though you may only see one person at a hearing, there is a team behind that person. And that team includes a pretty good bench. I don't think anyone would fault that bench at all. So I think a little bit of patience here and you will see quite a significant effort as we move along.
Any more thoughts on this topic?
That team help us with the fire department?
Mark, it'd probably be money really well spent, actually.
Indeed.
I mean, I think, Greg, we're obviously racking up expenses with the law firm. What type of charges are we paying hourly? Do you know, or is it a range or?
It's like 225-ish,
Okay,
maybe 235.
okay.
And Greg, this is a budget for legal services that's part of the 95,000? No, yes, 95,000. Is that our?
Well, we'll be going significantly over that this year. You'll be
I understand,
seeing,
but I'm looking at what we have in the budget. I hope I'm looking at the right line. Is it?
yes,
I'm
that's
looking
correct.
under general government for legal, and that's
Right.
95. Okay.
Right.
So, and that's a largely unsupportable number from what I'm sensing your comment is. Really ought to be substantially higher.
Yeah, I'll have a better sense of numbers in a little while here, and we may want to do a supplement as part of this for the current year.
Yep. Yep.
Anything else on this? Mark, do you want to just give us, I know you had a CPC meeting today. Do you want to just give us a brief recap of that?
Yes, we moved in the direction that we all talked about last week, which was the CPC voted unanimously to recommend $800,000 from the CPC for the Pine Street field and $50,000 to complete the funding of the engineering study this year, this fiscal year, with the 56,000 that the town would throw in on the rotunda, given its emergency status. So those were the two items from our last meeting. And we all agreed that we would pass over any funding or discussion of Sweeney Park until the study was done and the information was more definitive on scope and cost.
Any questions of Mark? So have you approved all of the projects now on
Yes,
CPC? Okay, so you're done. Okay. So we should probably put that on our agenda at some point, right?
I know that Jack is going to reach out to Greg with our final list. The good news is Ron keeps a very, very good spreadsheet that you can look at quickly and know exactly what's going on. And I think Jack's intent is to share that and talk with Greg, make sure that everything's in order. And then, yes, I think there should be a presentation here to us.
We don't have any minutes to review because they're stuck in my inbox, so I will desperately try to get to those really soon. I want to talk about two different meetings. One is the next one on February 17th, and one is the one on February 23rd. February 23rd is school vacation week. By pushing out town meeting, we have a little extra time. Do we want to not hold a meeting on February 23rd? People have an opinion on that.
I wouldn't be able to make the 23rd, sorry.
Okay,
Is it the 23rd or the 24th?
I thought we were-
24th is Thursday?
24th is the,
I'm sorry, 24th. You're right, Peter. Yep.
that I can make,
Oh,
I think.
But just as a personal matter, I'm going to be away on the 3rd of March. I don't know if that, I don't know, I understand the vacation week is probably the preference. But just suggest that.
I'm also away on the 3rd of March. Might be able to tune into a meeting, but it's kind of difficult.
be out of town, but I can plug in. But if we skip the 3rd and do the 24th, that would.
That's
maybe
better.
That's even better.
That would be
Okay.
better from my point of view.
okay. So I won't get the week off. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Can we afford to take 2 weeks off?
No, it's okay. So the meeting on February 17th, next week, Thursday. I think you said, Greg, we have the health department.
Right, I was gonna have Board of Health come in to talk about their request for
Another
looking
person.
at 2 different options, but we'll have information for you in a presentation.
Okay. Do you have anybody else lined up?
No, I don't. Did you want the library in, or did we decide that that wasn't necessary? Yeah,
I
okay.
think we decided it wasn't necessary,
Right,
unless
that-
somebody
that was-
disagrees with me. So
Fine,
should we
never
do CPC next week? Do Board of Health and CPC?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. Anything else that people want on the agenda?
May I talk about the fire department for just a sec?
Sure.
Mark asked for something that I think still is very valuable, which is a spreadsheet of the net benefit or the net cost of different options.
Yep.
I think, Mark, you asked for this, and I've heard a lot of numbers tonight, and I must admit I don't have them all captured in my brain. But I think it'd be valuable to look at. I know the chief has presented different options, what the different elements and how they're affected by adding staff or safer or the overtime and the rest. It would be on a spreadsheet to be able to review.
Yeah, I wrote that. I wrote that down and circled it as a task.
Okay, is that something that can be asked for? Is that, because I think it would
Yeah.
help clarify the
Yeah.
various options.
I'll work with the chief on getting that to you.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
The slide presentation that he was referencing, is that available somewhere or
I'll make sure we all get copies of that.
Okay, good.
most helpful?
Sarah, I'm wondering if it would be beneficial at some point, maybe on the 24th, to just talk about long-term planning. And again, I think this goes to obviously capital, which Greg has laid out. And it does change from year to year, but we definitely look at the 5-year capital plan. But I think there's also some long-term operating issues. And once again, it looked like a lot of capital items were loading up in around 25, 26, DPW building, some fire apparatus, other things like that. School's been talking about an override. We've got rotundas and dredging, and I think it would be good to just kind of look at a 5-year and a 10-year picture and see where these things kind of drop in.
For capital or for and operations, both?
Well, I would just sort of say for overall town financial issues. I mean, I
Okay.
think, Greg, the operating is pretty steady state from year to year. There are bumps like if we go 4 on 4 shifts of, 4 on and 4 shifts type thing in fire, but for the most part, the operational is pretty steadily tracked, but there are things coming along that,
But
you got Lincoln Street well, I've heard, and we have, rotundas and dredging and DPW buildings. And when we start looking at all this, what does the next 5 and 10 years look like? And the reason I point this out is there may be some things that we want to do earlier, anticipating a big bump in the road coming up a little further or whatever. So,
and I think we need to look at the impact on the operating budget of some of these capital items. For instance, if you're building a new field on Pine Street, what's that do to DPW maintenance? If you do Sweeney Park, what's that do to DPW maintenance? So I think some of the capital items do impact the operating budget. I mean, we used to have a spreadsheet, Greg.
Showed the capital or the,
For everything. We projected out.
yeah,
Oh, that forward-looking,
Yeah. you
Right,
know what I'm
yeah.
talking about.
the school was always plugged in at about, 3.2, and
right.
most of the other departments climbed along at 2.5 or
oh,
give or
yes,
take.
yeah,
Yeah, that was our override predictor.
It was what Sam Martin started.
Yeah, we can definitely update that.
Okay. And what do we want for the capital, Maury? A spreadsheet?
I think that would be helpful. I mean, Greg, you've got this already in this book or our plan broken out by 23, 24, 25. But could we roll it all up into one?
Well, yeah, and as you say, some of those other issues that are percolating,
Yeah.
the rotunda, the treating the Lincoln Street well, perhaps for PFAS and things like that.
But that's the point of the plan. There was no rotunda in the 5-year plan this year.
Right.
The study for an emergency problem was going to come in 2025. So
So what's your point, Mark?
I spend too much time looking at the capital budgets throughout the last 5 or 6 years and say, do they bear any resemblance to one another? And, the chief waxed on tonight about a few items that have never been in a capital budget. Software, never seen it. It's not the kind of thing that you don't know about, right?
And that gray cabinet.
Hey,
Bottom
Andy
filler.
and I had to take the tour and listen to all these things. By the time you got out of there, you said like, Jesus, let me go jump in the ocean,
Well,
A lot of stuff.
we didn't have a slide with an aircraft carrier on it this year, which I was extremely thankful of. But,
He was gonna do a video and I suggested maybe not.
some questions too are some of these things operational versus capital? And I don't know, Greg, I know you're
Right.
probably watching this, but software, for example, is that really capital or is that more of an operational? And I must say, I got a little confused when we were talking about building capital at 30 grand a year, and yet we had building repairs and building maintenance at 8,500 dropping up and down from year to year. And it's like, where do these things really belong? But
Yeah, I mean, that building capital, that just sort of morphed. That didn't, that really should be operating.
Okay.
It was never intended to do what it's being used for right now.
No, like a couple of years ago, we approved the wall that people wanted to build between the
Right.
engine and the office space, and then didn't get built. So that was 35 grand that just kind of,
That's exactly what happened.
hung the
And that's
line.
part of the 63,000 balance?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how much of it might have been spent for other stuff, but
Yeah.
it was just an example. And again, Andy and I heard the rap on it, which was, oh no, Mark, we could never do that because of the way the carcinogens work on the suits. Well, who thought that through? You know, requested it. This is just, and you all have mentioned that have been doing this longer than I have. You know, we get one chief that wants a pickup truck, another chief that wants a ladder truck, and it's very difficult, absent looking at what are other people doing, which, you know, there was that study that y'all did, I think a year or so before I came on. I'll get to dig it out, that Diane did.
Yep.
Yep.
You know,
That was very thorough. She did a lot of research on benchmark communities and pretty insightful.
that
Well,
would
Tim-
very help. It's not very easy, at least for me, to listen to the analog numbers and all this about, you know, the Arkin-Farker valve connects to the canary pin, and that doesn't work. So there'd be 10 people will die if this ever happened. If you look at it, we got six fire engines. Essex has 2. Rockport has 20. You know, like, okay, I start to get an idea, but absent that, it's very difficult to figure out priorities. It's always better to have more firefighters than less. You know, and that's what they get up and they say at town meeting is, if you want the ambulance to show up, you better vote yes. And that does piss me off that, you know, we morphed to 2 ambulances. That is not in good conscience what anybody had in mind, so.
Well, and that concerns me when he talks about all this other equipment. He's going to hold in reserve, the one that is going out of service. How many vehicles are we going to have? It's going to be like the DPW that has who knows how many vehicles now.
Well, I
You
just,
could you saw this, kind of rising curve of expenses, because some of the capital follows the staff, because there was
Right.
a projection of a possibility of an assistant chief, and then we need a vehicle for the assistant chief.
I saw that in that
And
little
then I
small
was thinking to
print.
myself, where are we going to park that one? And, it's just, as was said, Diane did a lot of good work in that study, and that study, the outcome was, pointing toward we are overspending, for our community. That was her conclusion, both for police and fire. And it's hard to reconcile that with, the ask from, that we got, from Chief Cleary and before from his predecessor. And it's not to say that, Chief Cleary's, projections and the basis for his projections are wrong. They quote, chapter and verse NFPA. I'm familiar with the NFPA documents. They're about, 6 feet long if you stack them up on a shelf, and they're constantly updated every 3 years, so the requirements get more, they don't get less. I don't have a sense of how strictly we need to adhere to certain chapter and verse. That's what I don't really know. And I don't, we're not qualified.
discussion that is missing, because everything is in an absolute of, we got to do this to save lives, or to be able to answer the call, and everything in life is a measured risk, and we're not really measuring. And it's his job to build the thing, to build it, I guess, but I guess we have to watch the financial aspects of it. I'm gonna, now that we're talking about it, I'm digging Diane's thing out again and taking another. But I don't think that contemplated ALS either.
So one thought is, and this is kind of lessons learned, having been at this, if there's a fire item on the warrant, it's going to get voted in.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. It's never on there for discussion. If it gets in print, it's going to get voted in. And you all probably remember an example about 3 years ago, Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen recommended waiting a year or two on additional turnout gear or hose. And the spouse of a person who was sitting up front got up and said, I think this is dangerous. We ought to vote. And everybody suddenly raised their hands and $40,000 bang, just done. And,
Was it Dell?
No, and I'll tell you, this group, our committee worked and deliberated and thought and had a logical plan that this was better done next year or the year after. And you get on town meeting and it's sort of the emotion and, it just gets voted through. So if it's in print, it's going to get voted.
Yeah.
Right.
Just for perspective, I think going back years ago, the first time I got a tour of the fire department and we saw that, the tank charging station.
Right.
The word at that time from the chief then was that, hey, we're lucky to have one of these. Most other communities have to go to a neighboring community in order to fill their tanks.
They must be paying overtime.
No, because
Apparently.
volunteers. Oh,
I am still struggling with this whole staffing overtime issue. I don't have a clear cut sense of that. I see it as a 400K annual ad and obviously trying to offset OT. But if it's four and four, and that's the baseline, and the floater isn't there, bang, we're into OT. And if you're doing OT for 8 people, you're going to see something. If you're doing OT for 12 people, you're going to see more. If you get an OT for 16 or 20 people, you're going to see more. And I'm just struggling with where this is going long-term.
Well, and I thought
Safer's a
that
great
the-
way to get into it, but eventually Safer's gone and then we're living with it. And so,
And I thought the floater was supposed to reduce overtime, and I don't see that overtime's been reduced since we added the floater. Right? I mean, I thought that was the purpose of the floater. So I agree that you say you're gonna have a staff of 4 and you're gonna do 40% of the time, and they're gonna start filling it with overtime. And we won't know it. We'll just be done.
well, that's why I think it would be good, and Maura, you were the one that introduced it. Show us some numbers, okay? So you get 3 people, you get 4 people. This is what you can anticipate, notwithstanding, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Like nobody does, folks, but why don't we look at what happened the last 5 years and take an average,
Work with the info that we have.
Yeah, get some relative idea of cost, benefit, and then we can make some.
Have there been sort of, safety issues with the current staffing? Have firefighters gotten hurt? Not that we want that to be the sort of evidence that staffing up is a better idea.
How did the existing firefighter who's, I think, been hurt, how did he get hurt? Greg, can you tell us that? The one who's been, I think, out so much in the last year?
He keeps injuring himself lifting patients. This is his 3rd time on his shoulder.
Yeah.
So we did get grant money to buy these power stretchers so they don't have to lift them. So that'll actually help.
Andy, I think fire is so hard to evaluate because very honestly, it's so infrequent. What you staff for against what that risk is, as you all keep saying. I mean, I think it's statistically 1 serious fire every year and a half makes for an awful lot of staffing sitting around. Of course, they're all doing emergency services. I mean, that's what we really have is an emergency service with a fire department on the side. in terms of what the day-to-day is. That's why I think this number of ambulances, I don't sure why we tolerate having two. I think it's an invitation to expand the ambulance, but I guess.
And,
You know,
and I think,
thought that was. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
think you talk about the old Essex Road fire, and they called in, what, 6 different departments?
Hmm.
I mean, it's not like they're expecting to fight a fire on their own.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
I don't
What
know if
happened
you've
at
actually
University
been to
Lane
look
too,
at,
right?
oh, I was gonna
Sorry,
say,
Mark.
I don't know if you've been to look at that. I was visiting a friend and ended up going to the end of the street. And that structure is unbelievable. I mean, if we had 18 firefighters, I don't know if you would be able to handle that. I mean, it is amazing. That house is up on a hill. You go down in a gully and up on a hill, and then the structure itself must be 4 stories high in the back. I mean, that was a tough one for anybody. So
It was similar experience at University Lane, right? I mean, that one was.
That was different.
Yeah.
That wasn't plowed, so they couldn't get up.
Yeah,
And so they went the other, but they had another way in through Magnolia Ave, but it was filled with propane tanks
exactly.
too.
It sounded like that was an information issue, and then it was very strange. There's that much fuel on that site.
Yeah. Yeah, so,
These were tanks on the fire site, the site of the fire,
yeah,
At the house, yeah.
yeah,
at the house, yeah.
yeah.
Is that roadway really capable of handling a fire engine?
Really?
I mean,
Yeah.
it really goes all the way back to the approval process for that roadway, which strikes me as very marginal at best.
it's
No less-
an old,
no less
it's an old
snow.
road.
Goes back a lot of years.
Yeah,
Well, and it has a gate in the middle of the road. Halfway, you have to enter Universe Lane from 2 different directions, depending on which half you're going to.
I mean, I think that's, this is tangential, but I think it's relative, is that after that event, there was concern about, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, there was concern about water pressure. So we
Yes.
re-altered our capital plan in what may have been a more optimal way to deal with that water issue 2 or 3 years later, to move it up in the plan earlier. And, you know, you have to respond to what people want, but at the same time, there's a logic about, I think, the way things are being done in the town. And when an event happens that triggers a groundswell and we have to alter for that, it's inefficient, or it can be inefficient, at least financially. So.
Anything else? I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second,
second,
I'll second.
second, take a roll call vote. Maury,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Peter,
aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Did I miss anybody?
You?
Sarah says yes. Okay.
Sarah won't say aye.
Oh, aye, sorry.
What, is this talk like a pirate day?
Aye, aye, aye.
Okay, so see you next week and we'll do Board of Health and CPC.
Very good.
Thank you, Sarah. Good night,
All
everyone.
right,
Night,
very
everyone.
good.
Night, everyone.
And I-
Night.